The doctor was shocked when he saw the creature inside the newborn's nostril. "Hello, everyone. Enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch." The sound of rain lashed against the windows like relentless claws. The clock showed 2 a.m., and Mercy General Hospital was eerily quiet. Some outpatient clinics had turned off their lights, and the long hallway shimmered under pale green fluorescent lighting, adding to the chilling atmosphere. In delivery room number 4, Dr. Joseph Reynolds pulled on a pair of rubber gloves for the 3rd time that night, his eyes sunken with exhaustion. He glanced over at Nurse Lauren, who was hastily preparing gauze, while midwife Helen, a woman with dark skin and resolute eyes, was gripping the hand of the laboring mother Emily, who was screaming from the intense contractions. "Emily, breathe deeply. That's right. Don't tense your lower abdomen too early. Listen to me," Helen said loudly, tightening her grip on the young woman drenched in sweat. "Oh, God." "Paul, honey," Emily cried out in pain. Her husband Paul was trembling behind the glass window, pounding his fists together helplessly. Joseph leaned down between the mother's legs, speaking calmly. "I can see the baby's head. One more strong push, Emily, and we'll have her out." The room held its breath. "Count with me. 1, 2, 3, Helen shouted. Emily screamed, pouring all her strength into her body as if tearing herself apart. A rush of deep pink fluid spilled out, and then a tiny head emerged. Joseph caught the soft, wet little body, quickly clamped and cut the umbilical cord, and lifted the baby up, but no cry. No familiar sound broke the haunting silence of the night shift. "No, why isn't she crying?" Emily whispered hoarsely, trying to lift herself to see. "Let me handle this," Joseph said through gritted teeth, gently tapping the baby's back. Lauren quickly wiped the mucus from the baby's face, but the moment she touched the left nostril, she froze. "Joseph, look at this," she gasped, her hand letting the towel drop. Joseph bent over and his eyes widened. Something dark gray, soft like jelly, was protruding from the baby girl's left nostril, about the length of a pinky finger, writhing like a tentacle. "Oh my God," Helen whispered, her face pale. Joseph stepped back half a pace, then shouted, "Call an endoscopist. Get diagnostic imaging down here now. Bring portable equipment." Lauren turned pale as she picked up the intercom phone to call for help. Outside, Paul began pounding on the glass, yelling, "What's going on? What's happening to my baby? Someone talk to me." Emily struggled to sit up, but Helen held her back. "Don't. You're bleeding heavily. Please stay calm. Your baby is still breathing." "But what is that? What is in her nose?" Emily cried out. Within 5 minutes, 2 endoscopy doctors rushed in, one of them a young American intern named Michael Carter, his curly brown hair disheveled, round glasses askew, hands trembling as he held the endoscope. "Dr. Joseph, I've never seen anything like this," Michael stammered. "None of us have," Joseph replied, teeth clenched. "Insert the scope carefully. Do not scratch the nasal mucosa." They cautiously inserted the scope into the baby's nose, projecting a live image onto a portable screen. "Oh my God." Michael froze and collapsed backward. "Watch out," Lauren shouted. The endoscope slipped from Michael's hands, nearly hitting Joseph. On the screen, a grotesque image appeared. Inside the baby's nasal cavity were 3 worm-like organisms, translucent and fleshy, as if made of mucus and living tissue. They moved, writhing gently, each with small mushroom-shaped heads equipped with razor-thin fangs swirling in the fragile sinuses. "This can't be. What is that?" Helen stammered. "Parasites," Joseph whispered. Maybe a foreign environmental organism," Michael said shakily as he stood back up. "But why in the nose of a newborn?" Joseph closed his eyes for a few seconds, then took a deep breath. "Prep for an emergency endoscopic procedure right here. We can't move the baby. Her airway could be fully blocked at any moment." "You're saying surgery right here in the delivery room?" Lauren gasped. "We don't have a choice." Joseph called in an anesthesiologist and an endoscopic surgery nurse. Within 10 minutes, an improvised operation was underway on the delivery table, amid the sound of pouring rain and the labored breathing of everyone in the room. Emily, sedated and on pain medication, kept whispering, "Hope, my baby, my baby." Michael held the surgical light, his face drained of color. Helen, a seasoned midwife, was now monitoring the baby's breathing and vitals. She had to clench her own hands tightly to keep them from trembling. Meanwhile, Joseph performed the endoscopy with precision, threading the tube deep into each nostril, using a special tool to extract each organism. One slime-covered creature dropped into a stainless steel tray, writhing and emitting a high-pitched sound barely audible to the human ear. "Please don't let it bite," Michael whispered in English, stepping back half a meter. Joseph didn't look up. Hold the light steady. They're not venomous, but they are alive. The procedure lasted nearly 45 minutes. Finally, when the third parasite was removed, Joseph exhaled and signaled to stop. She's still breathing. Pulse is slightly more stable, Helen reported. Transfer her to a sterile isolation room. Alert the neonatal ICU for immediate intake. I want full blood work. And seal the organisms. No unauthorized access, Joseph ordered. Michael looked at Joseph, eyes still wild with shock. What do you think they are? Joseph looked up, wiping sweat from his brow. I don't know. But I'm sure of one thing. They didn't come from anywhere clean. As they wheeled the baby bassinet away, Emily tried to lift herself and called out, My baby, what's happening to my baby? Someone tell me. Paul rushed over to hold her. I don't know what's going on, but I'm here. I'm right here. Emily clutched her chest and began to sob. She had no idea that the parasites they had removed were just the tip of the nightmare ahead. Outside the neonatal ICU, a red light blinked above the door, signaling a special isolation zone. The rain still hadn't stopped, dripping through a crack in the hallway window, hitting the cold stone floor in rhythmic drops. The night air thickened, not just from the weather, but from the horror that had just unfolded in delivery room number 4. Joseph stood still, staring at the 3 jars containing the strange organisms, now sealed in a specialized stainless steel tray. Each jar held a creature about 7 centimeters long, soft, slimy, with translucent jelly-like bodies and swollen heads exposing 2 fine fong-like teeth, twitching faintly. Helen, seal them. Label them under high-risk biological threat, Joseph instructed, his voice low and hoarse. Nurse Helen carefully placed the jars into a secure case, sealing it with a barcode lock. Her face was still pale. Doctor, seriously, what are these? She asked quietly. I don't know yet, Joseph replied, eyes fixed on the creatures. But if they're the reason that baby couldn't breathe after birth, then this hospital has a very serious problem. Michael Carter stood nearby, still reeling from the shock of the surgery. He held his head and muttered, I studied parasitology in Ithaca. Never seen anything with this structure. Could be a new species. Helen guessed. Or a foreign variant, Joseph said. We won't speculate. I've sent an urgent request to the hospital's biology department. They'll receive the samples and begin analysis tomorrow. A man in a white coat approached, the attending physician, Dr. Andrew Richards, the highest authority on duty that night. His face was stern, with deep lines at the corners of his eyes. He pointed at the sealed box. This stays confidential, he said firmly but softly. Not a word leaves this building. But this is a public health threat. Joseph objected immediately. That baby girl nearly died from an unidentified parasite. We have a duty to inform. Andrew met his eyes directly. And let tomorrow's headlines scream across the country. Send pregnant women fleeing this hospital. Turn this facility into a rumored nest of parasites, without conclusive evidence. Michael murmured, We should at least report to the CDC. There will be no reports until we have confirmation, Andrew said sharply. I'll personally oversee the content of the investigation from the biology department. Joseph was silent for a few seconds. He knew this was no longer a medical case. It was now a carefully contained ring of information control. Meanwhile, the baby girl, named Hope, had been moved to the sterile unit of the NICU. A team of intensive care staff stood by 24/7. But even after the parasites had been removed, her breathing remained irregular. High-pressure ventilator is still failing to stabilize SpO2 levels, a nurse reported. Lungs show no mechanical damage, but airway tissues appear to have been inflamed for a prolonged time. Helen, monitor oxygen saturation every 30 minutes. Report any changes to me immediately, Joseph instructed. He stepped out into the hallway where Emily lay on a rolling bed, eyes wide with fear. Paul sat slumped at the edge, gripping her hand, shaking. Dr. Joseph, Emily rasped. Please, tell me how my baby is. Joseph hesitated, then sat down beside her. He couldn't offer false comfort. Miss Emily, he said, your daughter is under special monitoring. We performed an endoscopic procedure and removed several foreign objects that were obstructing her nasal passages. Foreign objects. Paul frowned. Are you saying she inhaled something? During birth? Not during birth, Joseph replied slowly. I'm afraid the objects were present before she was born. Emily's eyes widened as she gasped. You mean they were inside her when I was still pregnant? We can't say for certain yet, Joseph said cautiously. but I suspect a form of parasite may have entered through your respiratory system and settled inside the fetus." Paul cursed. Jesus Christ, what the hell is happening? Suddenly, the door burst open. A nurse rushed in, panic on her face. "Dr. Joseph, baby Hope just had a sudden oxygen drop. We're preparing to intubate." Joseph jumped up and followed the nurse without a word. Emily screamed behind him. "Joseph! Joseph! Please save my baby." An hour later, Joseph stood silently, looking at baby Hope through a thick glass window. She lay in a modern incubator, connected to dozens of tubes, a ventilator, 4 lines, heart monitor leads, SPO2 sensors attached to her tiny feet. Her fragile body was pale and limp, as if she had just survived a terrible storm. Michael approached, holding a stack of lab papers. "Joseph," he said quietly, "I wasn't allowed to print this, but I secretly photographed a draft of the analysis from the nasal sinus sample. Look at this." He showed an image, a microscopic scan of the cellular structure from one of the parasite secretions. "Living cells?" Joseph asked. "Not just alive, they have active genes. They use a semi-autotrophic mechanism, absorbing nutrients from the host while reproducing through spores." Joseph's brow furrowed. "Spores. They can release microscopic spores into the air," Michael said. "If Emily inhaled them during pregnancy, this could be happening to other women too." "Oh God," Michael whispered. "You know what this means, don't you?" "This might not be an isolated case," Joseph replied, eyes fixed on Hope. "This could be the tip of the iceberg." By early morning, Joseph arrived at the hospital's biology department to hand over the samples, but an employee intercepted him and handed him a notice. "All samples related to neonatal case 23-6ES will be handled under internal directive. Unauthorized tampering, disclosure, or transfer of data is prohibited." At the bottom was the seal of the hospital director. Joseph clenched the paper, feeling his blood rush to his head. He turned to Michael. "They're covering this up." Michael nodded, lowering his voice. "Joseph, if you're going to keep digging, you'll need someone who can take this public. A journalist. Do you know anyone?" Michael hesitated, then said, "Yes, an old contact, Martha Ellis. She writes for the Beacon Post. She's investigated medical leaks before." Joseph took a deep breath, his gaze hardening. "Good. We need to prepare everything carefully. If they want to silence me, then I have to speak loud enough for the entire country to hear." 5 p.m. The rain had eased, but the sky over the Illinois prairie was still gray and bleak, like the face of someone after a funeral. A worn-out silver pickup truck stopped in front of a roadside motel. The door opened, and Paul jumped out first, face tight with worry. "Easy," he said, helping Emily, still weak after the harrowing birth 2 nights ago. She leaned into him, her eyes vacant, her cracked lips unable to form words. They stood before the rusted gate of Sunny Acres Motel, owned by a man named Mr. James. The place was a U-shaped row of single-story units with whitewashed, mold-stained walls and green moss creeping along the foundation. Rainwater still dripped from broken gutters. The air reeked of damp mildew. Paul pushed the gate open, its hinges groaning like a tired complaint. A barefoot child ran past, carrying the smell of mud and rotting trash. They entered room number 7, the cheap rental they'd been staying in for months. As soon as he opened the door, Emily covered her nose. "What's that smell?" she cremated. Paul didn't answer. He flicked on the light, which cast a dim glow over stained walls blotched with black mold, like burnt skin. The tiny room contained a creaky wooden bed, an old dining table, and a camping stove set up on a stool. Water dripped from the ceiling above the rusted sink pipes. Emily looked up and fell silent. "We lived here the whole pregnancy," she whispered. Paul turned to her, voice heavy with irony. "At least it has a roof." Suddenly, a noise came from under the sink. Emily jumped. "Is that a rat?" "No, probably a loose pipe again." Paul sighed and knelt down to check, but in the dim light, he froze. A round stain on the concrete floor glistened like dried glue. In the center was a tiny black dot, wriggling. "Emily," he called, "come look at this." She stepped closer. For a moment, they both stood frozen. It wasn't a rat. It wasn't a roach. It was a tiny creature, about 1 centimeter long, translucent like jelly. It had microscopic tentacles waving gently in the puddle. As Emily exhaled, the thing recoiled. "No way." Paul stepped back. Emily clutched her empty belly and whispered, "It looks like what was inside Hope." Paul immediately grabbed her arm and flung the door open. "We're not staying here another second." But just as they reached the yard, they collided with a man in a leather jacket, holding a cigar. An old man with a grizzled beard, squinted eyes, and a hooked nose. His voice rasped like smoke. "What's going on?" he asked with a sneer. Paul squinted. "Are you Mr. James?" "That's right," he exhaled smoke. "I own this place. Got a problem?" Emily pointed back at their room, voice shaking. "That room has some kind of creature. It's wriggling under the pipes. I just gave birth to a baby who nearly died from parasites, and I lived my entire pregnancy in your building." Mr. James frowned. "What kind of nonsense is that? You accusing me?" "Accusing?" Paul shouted. "Mercy General Hospital just pulled 3 living organisms out of my baby's nose, and now we find a similar creature in your property." James let out a dry laugh. "I'm not responsible if you live filthy and get sick. I rented you that room fair and square. Law doesn't say I have to offer luxury. You don't see this could be life-threatening." Emily nearly screamed. James glared and lowered his voice. "Don't push your luck. If you make trouble, I have ways to kick you out of here for good." Paul clenched his fists, but Emily pulled him back and whispered, "Don't. We're not staying. Let's go." They left the motel and took a taxi to the nearest health station. There, Emily asked for help inspecting their living environment. After 3 hours of waiting and explaining, they were referred to Dr. Amanda Brooks, a public health expert working with a volunteer environmental team. Dr. Amanda, a woman in her 50s from Peoria with thick glasses and a stern expression, listened and nodded. "I've heard rumors about that motel, but no one ever filed a formal report." "Well, now you have one," Paul said. The next day, Amanda returned to the motel with 2 environmental specialists, including Ethan Moore, a young American technician with cropped hair and a soft voice, alongside Paul and Emily. Mr. James blocked the entrance. "You're not coming in without a warrant." Amanda held up her public health inspection credentials and said firmly, "You don't want me calling the police for obstructing a public health investigation, do you?" James ground his teeth, then reluctantly stepped aside, eyes full of hostility. The team entered room number 7. Ethan unpacked his tools, shining a LED light along the wall cracks, under the bed, around the sink, and down the drain pipes. Within 20 minutes, he called out, "Dr. Amanda, you need to see this." Under a broken tile beneath the cabinet, he removed a rotted board to reveal dozens of pale yellow specks, the size of rice grains, tiny egg clusters clinging like mold. "Eggs," Ethan said. "They look like some larval stage organism. Some have already hatched. The empty shells are still here." "Any live specimens?" Amanda asked. "Yes." Ethan pointed to the side, where a few small organisms were moving, tentacled, slimy, eerily similar to the parasitic samples in Joseph's report. Amanda pulled out her phone and photographed the entire scene. Her expression turned deadly serious. "This is a parasitic nest," she said, "one I've never seen in any biological documentation. They appear airborne capable." Emily stepped back, covering her mouth. "Oh God, I breathed this in, every day, for 9 months. Ethan frowned. "If these are the same organisms found in baby Hope's nasal cavity, then this isn't just an environmental hazard, it's a serious public health threat." Amanda tilted her head toward Emily. "Do you give me permission to take air samples and a hair sample from you?" "Yes, as much as you need. Do whatever it takes to figure out what hurt my baby." Ethan nodded and began collecting samples. Meanwhile, from a distance, Mr. James watched the team intently. He pulled out his phone and called someone. That afternoon, Amanda sent all the samples and photos to the epidemiology department of the Springfield Regional Health Institute. She also called Dr. Joseph directly. "Joseph, I need to meet you. This is more serious than we thought." "Amanda, what did you find?" Joseph's voice came through the line. "A parasitic nest right where Emily lived during her entire pregnancy. Dozens of egg clusters. Active larvae." Joseph was silent for a few seconds. Amanda continued, "This can't be dismissed as a one-off case, and we can't let James bury this." The next morning, in a small office inside the old technical wing of Mercy General Hospital, Dr. Joseph sat alone at his computer, typing search commands into the internal database. Under the pale light from a dusty window, he didn't realize he was gripping the mouse so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He had just gotten off the phone with Amanda Brooks, who confirmed the discovery of eggs from the same organism found throughout Emily's motel room. A quiet rage surged through Joseph like an underground storm. He typed the keywords, "newborn death cause, sudden respiratory failure residence near Sunny Acres." The results appeared almost instantly. Case 1, An 8-day-old boy died at home, brought to the clinic at 3 a.m. Case 2, a 5-day-old girl died after feeding, did not respond to resuscitation. Case 3, a newborn boy survived only 12 hours, showed no stable respiratory reflexes. All 3 cases were within the past 6 months. All 3 babies lived around the Sunny Acres Motel. None received thorough autopsies. "This can't be a coincidence," Joseph muttered, digging deeper. He pulled up a brief note from the head night nurse on the second death. Thick mucus with strange odor observed in the baby's nostrils. Wiped before CPR. No further inspection due to rapid blood pressure collapse. Joseph slammed his hand on the desk. Just then, the door swung open. Michael Carter entered, looking tense. "Joseph," he said urgently, "I just spoke with a retired nurse named Beatrice Morris. She used to work in the neonatal unit here, and she told me something strange." "What is it?" Joseph turned sharply. Michael closed the door, pulled the curtain, and whispered like someone afraid of being overheard. "Beatrice said that about 4 months ago, a newborn girl died shortly after birth. While cleaning the body, she saw a slimy thing emerge from the baby's nose, like a tiny worm." Joseph froze. "And?" "She reported it to the attending doctor that night. But the next day, all records were confiscated. She was reprimanded for causing panic and encouraged to retire early." "Does she remember who that doctor was?" Joseph asked firmly. Michael nodded. "It was Dr. Stephen Martin. He's now on the hospital's board of directors." Joseph drew in a long breath, his voice cold as steel. "So they've known all along." Michael sat down and pushed a folder toward Joseph. "I secretly photocopied part of the internal legal records. Look closely at the signatures on the death reports of the 3 infants." Joseph flipped through the pages, each one signed by Stephen Martin. That evening, Joseph went to the Cedar Haven nursing home where Beatrice Morris lived. She was a petite woman in her 60s, silver hair neatly tied back, sitting by the window reading. "Parasites in the nose. I've never seen anything like that," she said after hearing Joseph's story. "But when I reported it, Stephen told me I was imagining things, blamed it on mental decline due to age. Did you keep anything from that time? Photos, notes, anything?" Joseph asked. Beatrice hesitated, then opened a drawer and pulled out an old notebook, its spine frayed. She opened it to a specific page and pointed at a handwritten line. "February 17th, yellow mucus from newborn snows. Felt like a small organism emerged but retracted quickly. Dr. Stephen told me not to mention it." Joseph's hands trembled. "That's it. Exactly what I pulled out of Hope's nose." Beatrice grasped his hand tightly. "I knew I wasn't crazy, but I've stayed silent for 4 months out of fear of being sued. You're not going to let this be buried, are you?" Joseph looked her in the eye. "No, I won't let another baby die. I promise." The next day, Joseph returned to the hospital, only to be stopped at the entrance to the data wing by security. "Sorry, doctor. You're not authorized to enter the data center. Directive from the board." He pulled out his ID and scanned it. The machine beeped, "Access denied." A message appeared on his phone from Michael. "Be careful. Someone's trying to lock your internal account. Stephen knows." Just then, Joseph received an anonymous phone call. A deep, cold male voice spoke. "If you want to keep your job, your reputation, you better know when to stop. You're digging too deep." "James," Joseph snapped. "You should ask yourself, who's behind James?" The call ended. Joseph stood frozen in the hospital lobby. That night he went to a small cafe on the corner, where Michael and Amanda were already waiting. The 3 of them sat in a back booth, speaking quietly. "Michael, do you still have a copy of the parasite sample?" Joseph asked. "Yes. I backed up the genetic analysis to a separate USB, and I already sent a copy to a lab in San Francisco for DNA structure confirmation. And you, Amanda, I filed a preliminary report to the Regional Epidemiology Council. But an hour later, someone from the government called demanding we pause the investigation due to insufficient verified evidence." "James is behind this," Michael muttered. "It's not just him. The entire system is trying to silence us," Joseph said bitterly. Amanda looked at Joseph, eyes burning. "We have to act. They have money and power, but we have the truth. If the official health system won't listen, we'll let the media speak." Michael nodded. "I know someone who won't be afraid. She exposed the black market liver transplant scandal in Chicago. Her name is Martha Ellis." Joseph clenched his fist. "Contact her. We're out of time." Tuesday afternoon. The sky over Springfield was weighed down with a sheet of lead and gray. Ash-colored clouds drifted silently over the red-tiled rooftops of the residential area. Joseph stood before the rusted gate of the Sunny Acres Motel, both hands gripping a leather folder. He wore his white lab coat, collar stiff, gaze unwavering. The gatekeeper peered at him through the mesh screen. "Here for a medical appointment. No one's registered." "I'm here to inspect living conditions," Joseph replied curtly. "I'm a physician from Mercy General Hospital, and I have evidence that this property is the source of a public health threat." The gatekeeper frowned and pulled out his phone. Less than 3 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up, parking diagonally across the entrance. Out stepped Mr. James, wearing a light brown suit, black shirt, and red tie, gripping a cane with a silver head. "Joseph Reynolds," he called, smirking. "I heard you've been making noise about something living in babies' noses." "Don't pretend to be surprised." Joseph walked right up to him. "I have solid evidence, parasite samples, egg specimens, genetic analysis, and 3 infant deaths directly linked to this place." James scoffed, snorting. "So what? So what? You knew these organisms were here and still rented this property without repairs, without warnings, without health inspections. You'll face criminal charges if you don't come clean." James stepped closer, lowering his voice to Joseph's ear. "Do you even know who you're messing with?" Joseph didn't flinch. "A coward hiding behind forged documents, who let children die and thinks money can erase guilt." A flash of anger sparked in James's eyes. He slammed his cane to the ground. "You little bastard. I'm going to expose everything. Don't think a few altered medical files and hush money can silence everyone forever. I've worked with epidemiologists, journalists, and the people in this community." James stared Joseph down. No more smirks, no more mockery, only a cold gaze like the blade of a knife. "You think just because I'm old, you can do whatever you want," he growled. "I served 8 years on the regional council. I've had lunch with the governor. You think some worms in a kid's nose scare me?" Joseph stayed calm. "No, you're not scared. But you will be when what you're hiding airs on the 8 o'clock news." James narrowed his eyes, as if weighing something more dangerous than guns, public opinion. "Martha Ellis, is she your person?" he asked. Joseph frowned. "She's a journalist, and she follows the truth, not people." James turned his back, motioning for the gatekeeper to step aside, then spoke slowly. "Listen to me, Joseph. Walk away. I'll set you up at a private hospital, triple your current salary, a company car, a house in Brookhaven. Don't turn yourself into a martyr." Joseph smiled, a smile without a hint of surrender. "I'm not a martyr. I just don't want another little girl to die because of you." Suddenly, James threw his cane to the ground and lunged, grabbing Joseph by the collar, his face inches away. "You'll regret this. I promise you that. You'll never work in Springfield again. They'll drag you through medical ethics boards. The media will twist your image. You'll lose everything." Joseph didn't flinch. "Try me. You'll fall before I do." A car horn blared behind them. A civilian vehicle pulled up along the curb, and the window rolled down. Inside sat Martha Ellis, her brown hair messy, her eyes sharp as blades, holding a professional camera. She clicked twice, capturing the exact moment James had his hand on Joseph's collar. James whipped around, eyes wide. "You bitch." "Go ahead and sue me, Mr. James," Martha called out through the window. "But by the time you find a lawyer, these photos will already be online." James stepped back, clenching his jaw, his face frozen in place. That night, in his office, Joseph received an email from the hospital's board of directors. Notification: Dr. Joseph Reynolds is hereby temporarily suspended for violating internal data protocol, including disclosing unverified medical information outside the hospital. Michael messaged him moments later. They'd started to push back. "Someone on the board is with James." Paul also called. "Joseph, we can't pay for the next oxygen treatment. The hospital's demanding a deposit since you've been suspended." Emily took the phone next. The baby turned blue again at 4 a.m. "We need another round of high-pressure oxygen. I'm begging you, don't let them push you out of the hospital." Joseph felt like he was being locked inside a steel cage. Every exit was being sealed. The next morning, at a small diner near the hospital, Martha sat with Joseph and Michael. On the table was a thick folder of documents she had printed from what Joseph and Amanda had sent. Photos, maps of the motel, images of the parasites, everything. "James isn't alone," Martha said. "I looked into it. He's got real estate ties with Landmark Realty, a company that's received permits for numerous illegal constructions. He's got protection from the regional council." Michael sighed. Then we're not just up against one man. We're fighting a den of vipers. We have a way, Martha said, her eyes alight. I can't go on mainstream TV. They've already been paid off. But I can air it on Freedom Wave Radio, an independent station in Peoria. They'll run the story if I can prove it's real. Joseph nodded. I'll get the documents, but I need to return to the motel and collect another egg sample for visual confirmation. No, Michael interrupted. They'll stop you. They're watching you. Martha was quiet for a moment, then pulled out a mini camera. I'll go in your place. I'll pose as a new tenant and record footage overnight. I've done this before, in Mexico. I'll be fine. Joseph gripped her hand. You're taking a risk. I live to write what must be known, Martha said. If we don't do this, who will? That night, in a small rented room near the motel, Joseph sat alone and replayed the audio of his confrontation with James. Through his headphones, that raspy, menacing voice echoed, "You'll regret this." Joseph smiled faintly, the smile of someone who has nothing left to lose, but holds the truth in his hands. In the dead of night, the third-floor biological lab at Mercy General Hospital lay in darkness. Only the dim glow from the air conditioning unit illuminated the stainless steel shelves, making the room feel like a lifeless operating chamber. Joseph stood by the door, his ear pressed to the wall, listening to the fading footsteps of a security guard. Sweat trickled down his neck despite the cold. In one hand, he held an access card. In the other, a special encrypted USB stick, courtesy of an old college friend in Toronto. He had one chance. Taking a deep breath, he tapped the card to the scanner. Beep! The door unlocked. Joseph slipped inside and shut it quietly behind him. He didn't turn on the lights. He knew every inch of the place like the back of his hand. In the far right corner was the sample cabinet, where the biology team had sealed the 3 parasitic organisms removed from Hope's nose. His name was still on the label, J. Reynolds, Case ES-23, Internal Handling. He unlocked it. Inside were 3 specimen jars in formaldehyde. The creatures no longer moved, but their slimy forms and curled tendrils were still nauseating to behold. Joseph whispered, "I'm sorry, but I need you alive, in data form." He took one jar, placed it carefully on the table, opened the lid, and used a pipette to extract cellular fluid and tissue. Pulling over the centrifuge, he began the cell separation process. For each step, he wore double gloves and an N95 mask, leaving no trace behind. After 30 tense minutes, Joseph extracted the DNA and inserted it into a portable sequencer. As it ran, he opened his laptop and contacted his friend in Canada, Dr. Adrian Cooper, now working at the Toronto Biotechnology Center. Adrian answered with a sleepy, serious voice. "Joseph, what are you sending me? It's the middle of the night here." "Sorry," Joseph whispered, "but I need this genome analyzed right now. It's a parasite, unknown to any European database. Can you run a quick scan through AI biomatching?" "I can," Adrian replied. "But if this is a medical specimen, were you authorized?" "No," Joseph said flatly, "and you don't need to ask further." A while later, the sequencer finished. Joseph downloaded the file and sent it straight to Adrian. Within 10 minutes, Adrian responded via video call. "Joseph," he said, "I can't believe what I'm seeing. This species has an RNA sequence unlike anything in recorded biology. It can produce prototoxic proteins and develop microeggs, small enough to survive in open air. Airborne transmission?" Joseph asked. "Yes," Adrian nodded. "Extremely high risk. If those eggs latch onto a pregnant woman's nasal membrane, they can invade the fetus's respiratory system. I found active genetic markers specifically adapted to low oxygen environments, which means they're optimized for newborn sinuses." Joseph went silent. "There's more," Adrian continued. "This organism grows fastest when exposed to low-grade insecticides, the kind commonly used in run-down housing complexes." "Oh God," Joseph muttered. "So the chemicals may have started it, and these things evolved from there." Adrian nodded. "It needs further verification, but this doesn't appear to be a natural parasite. It shows signs of industrial mutation." "Adrian, can you verify this in writing?" "Yes, but it'll have to be under my personal name, not the Institute's. Send it to me as soon as you can." Before hanging up, Adrian added, "Joseph, you're walking a fine line, but I'm with you." The next morning, in a discreet cafe on the outskirts of town, Joseph met with Martha Ellis. She had stayed up all night editing the special broadcast. "Here," she said, placing an envelope in front of him, "the recording of your conversation with James." His photos, the genetic structure data, notes from Dr. Adrian, and Ethan's documents on the egg nests in the motel. Joseph took it, his hands slightly trembling. "What are we about to do?" "We're going to release everything," Martha replied. "But I can't publish it on the Beacon Post. The editorial board got phone calls. Instead, I've chosen to air it on Freedom Wave Radio. It's an independent station. They'll broadcast it this Friday during prime time." "Do we have legal protection?" Michael, also present, interjected. Martha nodded. "Their editorial staff hasn't been bought, and I've already arranged a legal team." Joseph gave a small smile. "Good. But before we move forward, I want to ask Emily and Paul if they're willing to make Hope's medical records public." That evening, Joseph went to the temporary home where Emily and Paul were staying, with help from Amanda. It was a small house in a quiet suburb, with red tiles on the roof and bougainville vines blooming in the front yard. Emily was feeding baby Hope with a tiny spoon. The infant was still on low-level oxygen support. "Dr. Joseph," she said happily upon seeing him. "She's still breathing steadily." Paul wrapped his arm around his wife, eyes a bit red. "We heard you got suspended." "It's okay," Joseph smiled. "They can suspend me, but they can't suspend the truth." He sat down and gently placed the folder on the table. "Paul, I need your permission. We're about to share Hope's story with the public, so people will know, so this doesn't happen again, but I won't do it without your consent." Emily looked at her husband, then back at Joseph. "You saved my baby," she said softly. "We have nothing left to hold back. If this can help save other children, then do it." Paul nodded. "Just make sure our daughter stays safe." Joseph gripped their hands tightly, his eyes shimmering. "Thank you. I promise I won't let her suffer any more injustice." Friday night, Joseph stood beside Martha in the recording studio of Freedom Wave Radio in Peoria. The red broadcast light turned on. A deep male voice came through the speaker. "Good evening, listeners. This is a special report. Tonight, we bring you a story rejected by mainstream outlets. A newborn named Hope nearly died with 3 live parasites in her nose. These organisms were not natural. They came from a neglected motel riddled with chemicals and mold." Martha glanced at Joseph. Her voice trembled slightly, but it was clear and firm. The healthcare system knew. But it stayed silent. A doctor was suspended, a mother was blamed, and a powerful landlord laughs over the pain of the poor. A call-in number flashed on the live feed. Within 3 minutes, the phone lines lit up non-stop. "We live near Sunny Acres. I had a miscarriage no one could explain. My baby died after birth, and they never gave us a reason. I used to work for James. He mixed rat poison with chlorine to mask odors." The calls poured in. Martha looked at Joseph, her eyes calm like the surface of a lake before a storm. "You hear that? They're finally speaking out." The special report on Freedom Wave Radio ended at 11:07 p.m. Friday. Within 2 hours, over 60 calls were recorded, 19 of them from individuals who had lived at Sunny Acres. The data was encrypted, stored, and backed up on a secure server in Canada at Martha's request. But the next morning, total silence. No major newspapers ran the story. No TV stations quoted it. Not a single mention in the morning news. Martha stood in front of the Beacon Post headquarters, gripping her phone tightly, her eyes red. She had sent the full file to an internal journalist, someone who once promised to support any outlet brave enough to speak up. Instead, she received a single message. "Sorry, we're not allowed to intervene. Risk of conflict with the parent company's interests." At the same time, Joseph received an email from the Illinois Medical Board. "We hereby notify the indefinite suspension of Dr. Joseph Reynolds' medical license due to ethical violations related to unauthorized disclosure of medical records. This decision takes immediate effect." He stood frozen in the empty hospital corridor, phone buzzing in his hand. A new notification from his bank appeared. "Your account has been temporarily frozen pending review of suspicious transactions." Michael called, his voice seething. "They just searched my computer. I've been reassigned to cold storage. No computer access. No lab credentials." Martha's entire press archive was deleted from the internal server. Amanda messaged through an encrypted app. "I've been ordered to cease all activity related to Sunny Acres. They say it's no longer under preventive health jurisdiction." Every person who dared to speak had now been silenced. All doors appeared to be closing. Meanwhile, in a small rural town south of Springfield, Emily and Paul were fighting for every breath their daughter could take. Hope suddenly began breathing heavily, her skin pale and bluish, her eyes open but unresponsive. They rushed her to the county clinic, where the night doctor only shook his head. "We don't have high-pressure oxygen equipment. She needs to be transferred to Mercy General Hospital." We can't afford it," Paul said, voice cracking. "Dr. Joseph, he's been suspended. No one's helping us anymore." Emily clutched her child, sobbing. "Please, doctor, help her breathe." At home, Joseph sat motionless for 3 hours. Dozens of messages came in all at once. Former patients offering support, colleagues going silent, media ignoring him. The landline rang. He hesitated, then picked up. A raspy, cold voice spoke. "Joseph Reynolds. Congratulations, you officially have no voice left." Joseph narrowed his eyes. "James, doesn't matter. But you get it now. No one wants to hear about noseworms. People just want to sleep well, and you've ruined that. You won't work as a doctor anywhere again. You're a data trader. You'll lose your house, your career, your name, and no one will care." "What about hope?" Joseph asked quietly. The line went dead. He set the phone down, powerless. That night, he visited Emily. The house was thick with the smell of old medical equipment and baby towels. Hope lay motionless, only the faint beep-beep from the heart monitor showing life. Her eyes were open, but she had no reflex. Emily knelt beside the crib, screaming, "Dr. Joseph, I don't know if she'll make it to morning." Paul sat in the corner, head buried in his hands. Joseph looked at the tiny girl, already suffering before she even entered this world, and felt like the world itself was choking the most fragile among them. With no apology, he walked out to the back patio and punched the wall hard. Blood seeped from his knuckles. His breathing was heavy. A day passed, then 2. Still no one spoke up. Martha called him, her voice weary. "They froze all my accounts. I've been banned from every broadcast platform. The police summoned me for questioning." "Joseph, they're burying us alive." Joseph said nothing. "But I'm not backing down. I only need to ask once. Do you still want to keep going?" He answered slowly, "I don't need a voice. I just need her to live." Martha choked up. Tuesday morning. Hope could no longer breathe, even with the support machine. The county doctor shook his head. "Her lungs aren't responding to normal pressure. She needs specialized high-pressure treatment. But we don't have that machine," Paul screamed. "We've called everywhere, except Mercy General Hospital. It's the only one with the equipment." Emily stood still, then suddenly raised her head. Her face was pale, but her eyes were blazing. "We're going back there," she said. "Whatever it takes." That afternoon, a pickup truck carrying Paul, Emily, and baby Hope stopped in front of the ER at Mercy General Hospital. They stepped out, arms cradling their child, their faces cold and determined. A triage nurse stepped in front of them. "I'm sorry, you don't have an appointment." Emily screamed, "My daughter is suffocating. We don't need an appointment, we need a ventilator." The nurse hesitated. Just then, from down the hallway, Helen, the midwife who had helped deliver Hope, rushed over, still in scrubs, just off shift. "This is baby Hope?" she asked urgently. "Yes, she's ours," Emily cried. Helen saw the baby's condition and snatched the internal phone. "Call the ICU doctor. We've got a newborn going into acute respiratory failure. Prep room 5 now." The hallway erupted into chaos for a few seconds. Paul rushed forward carrying the baby. Emily followed close behind, eyes flooded with tears. From a distance, Joseph saw it all. He was there, but he couldn't go in. He was no longer a doctor. He stood outside the ICU, forehead pressed against the cold wall. An hour passed. Helen stepped out, pulling off her surgical mask, eyes red. Emily ran up to her. "How's my baby?" "We're giving her high-pressure oxygen, but it's only temporarily stable. We need a critical care physician to monitor her." "Joseph's license was revoked," Paul murmured. Helen looked toward the end of the hallway, where Joseph still stood silently. "But he knows this baby better than anyone," she said. "I don't need a permission slip. If he's still a human being, he has to come in." She turned. "Joseph, are you coming in?" Joseph slowly walked forward. His eyes were sunken, his hands trembling. He nodded. "I'm coming." Inside the ICU, baby Hope lay motionless, the ventilator stuttering. Joseph leaned down, placing his hand on her tiny chest, feeling her faint warmth. "Little one," he whispered, "it's just you and me now. Can you hear me? Don't give up." The red light blinked, her heart rate dropped. Helen shouted, heart rate at 82, dropping to 70. Joseph placed his hand on the ventilator tube and adjusted the pressure. Increase pressure by 0.2%. Keep the device temperature steady. Reattach the skin sensor to her left hand. Got it. Just give me 15 more minutes. Time froze. Every second cut like a knife. Then, the machine beeped steadily again. Heart rate 91. Oxygen up to 88. Joseph exhaled. He had never felt this exhausted. He bent down and gently touched Hope's forehead. You did it, sweetheart. You did so well. Outside the door, Emily collapsed, covering her face. Paul caught her and whispered, She's still alive. She's still alive. Outside, the rain began again. The first rain of the season, as if it had come to witness this fragile life pulled back from the edge of death, while the whole world had turned away. The next morning, after the heavy downpour, the sky over Springfield was oddly clear. Gentle sunlight filtered through the trees and reflected on the windows of Mercy General Hospital. Inside the neonatal ICU, Hope was peacefully sleeping. The ventilator had been removed. She was breathing on her own, faint but stable. Emily sat beside the crib, eyes still swollen, but her gaze brighter than it had been all week. You think she'll really make it through all of this? Paul asked quietly. Joseph nodded from behind. Hope proved that last night. This little girl is living proof of everything. Moments later, Martha walked in, carrying a backpack and a face both weary and determined. We can't let this end with one close call, she said immediately. I just sent everything to Resistencia Radio, all the footage, photos, legal documents, victim testimonies, Dr. Adrian's genetic analysis, and especially the recording between you and James. Will anyone actually air it? Emily asked, still hesitant. Martha smiled. Not just one station. 10. That evening, at exactly 8 p.m., a special program titled Inside the Cradle, Parasites and Silence aired simultaneously on 10 independent radio stations across the U.S. The voiceover, background music, and a powerful female narrator brought the broadcast to life in ways no one expected. Joseph's voice echoed through a recorded segment. I saw 3 living organisms inside the nose of a newborn girl. They weren't from allergies. They weren't infections. They were parasites. I removed them and got suspended. Then came Martha's voice, strong and clear. Mr. James, landlord of the motel, former regional council member, is accused of renting unsafe housing. At least 3 newborns died over 6 months. All had lived near that property. None received thorough autopsies. The narrator continued. When truth is buried, courage must rise. They were threatened, their accounts frozen, their careers ended, but they did not go silent. Within an hour, the program became the hottest topic on social media. Hashtags like #Hope, #James, and #ParasiteMotel climbed into the top 3 nationwide on Twitter. Over 2,000 comments flooded the Beacon Post's page that same night, demanding to know why they didn't publish the story. Martha didn't sleep. She received call after call from listeners. My baby died 2 months ago. We lived in Sunny Acres. The doctor said it was sudden infant death. But now I'm starting to wonder. I used to work construction for James. He used industrial-grade mold killers without protective gear. The next morning, at the Illinois Regional Health Authority, Director Matthew Rogers received a thick envelope marked urgent. Inside was the complete investigative file, victim lists, transcribed conversations, photo evidence, and most notably, a signed statement from Dr. Adrian Cooper in Canada, confirming the parasitic organism can damage fetal lungs via maternal respiratory exposure. Genetic data aligns with analyses from patient ES23. Matthew pressed his hand to his forehead. It was too late to deny it. He immediately called for an emergency joint meeting between the Departments of Health, Environment, and Media. Within 2 hours, a formal investigation order was issued for the Sunny Acres Motel. At the same time, the homepage of the Independent Press, one of the country's largest independent newspapers, featured a bold headline: Deadly Parasite Nest Exposed, How a System's Silence Killed Innocent Newborns. The article opened with a photo of Hope lying in the incubator beside her mother, captioned, The Girl Who Survived. But how many others didn't? That very afternoon, Sunny Acres was placed under lockdown. A full team of epidemiologists, environmental specialists, and public health officials arrived in hazmat suits, scanning the area. Outside, residents gathered, angry and emotional. We've been living like rats for years. He only took cash, no contracts. Evicted anyone who spoke out. I saw larvae in the water tank, but thought it was just dirty plumbing. Amanda and her team stood amid the crowd, distributing information forms. Ethan Moore handled sample collection, egg clusters, water samples, assisted by volunteer medical students. A 9-year-old boy sat beside his mother and asked softly, "Mom, if I already have parasites, can someone save me?" Amanda knelt, placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Yes, and no one else will have to live with that again." That same day, the regional court officially issued an emergency summons for Mr. James. 4 civil lawsuits and 2 criminal charges were filed within 24 hours. Outside his mansion in the suburbs of Springfield, reporters swarmed the gate. James stepped out, jaw clenched, sunglasses on, silent. "Mr. James, do you realize hundreds of people were harmed? Can you deny the audio recording threatening Dr. Joseph? Do you have anything to say to the mothers who lost their children?" James didn't answer, but for the first time in his life, he bowed his head as he stepped into the police car. At the hospital, Joseph received a letter from the medical board inviting him back to work after his suspension was revoked. In the letter, a handwritten note had been added. "We were wrong. Thank you for not staying silent." Helen beamed when she saw him return. "I kept your office untouched. Even the old coffee's still there." Joseph looked at her, eyes misty. "I never needed an office. I just needed the baby to live." Together, they walked to the ICU. Hope was lying in the crib, her tiny hand reaching into the air as if searching for someone. Joseph leaned down and held out his finger. She grabbed it instantly. "You're better now," he said. "You won't have to be afraid anymore." A national television special later aired titled Healthcare and Housing on the Edge of Life and Death, featuring interviews with Joseph, Martha, and Emily. The host asked, "If given the chance to do it all again, would you have stayed silent to protect yourself?" Joseph looked straight into the camera, voice firm. "Silence is never safe. It only breeds more people like James." The studio erupted in applause. At the same time, Martha was awarded the Courageous Journalist of 2025 by the Free Press Association. At the ceremony, she didn't give a speech. She simply held up a photo, baby Hope holding Joseph's hand at the hospital. "This is my article," she said, "not words. Lives worth saving." After the ceremony, Joseph sat alone beneath a tree outside the hospital. Michael approached, holding a bottle of water. "Do you think things will really change?" Michael asked. Joseph closed his eyes, lifted his face to the sky where sunlight streamed through the leaves. "Yes, because this time, we didn't stay silent." 10 days after the case exploded nationwide, the Sunny Acres boarding complex was completely demolished. Rotten walls, rusty pipes, mold-stained ceilings, everything was cleared, leaving bare earth. Authorities in Illinois pledged to rebuild a resettlement area under strict sanitary conditions. An environmental engineering team from Chicago came to collect samples of soil, water, and air. In the official report, they confirmed the number of parasite eggs found exceeded safety limits by 400 times. The species shows genetic structures never previously recorded. It poses specific risks to fetuses. The information was released nationwide. For the first time, an unknown parasitic nest was identified as the cause of a series of infant deaths. The media shifted tone. Newspapers that once remained silent now published tributes to Joseph, Martha, Amanda, Michael, Helen, and above all, baby Hope, whose image became a symbol of resilience. Health Matters magazine featured a cover photo of Joseph holding Hope nestled in his arms, her small hand resting on his white coat. Beneath it read, "No one should die in silence again." At Mercy General Hospital, Room 4, where Hope was born, was fully renovated. Joseph stood by the glass, his gaze distant. Helen walked over, holding a printed certificate. "It's official," she said, handing it to him. Joseph read slowly. "Dr. Joseph Reynolds is hereby reinstated with a full medical license and appointed to lead a special public health investigation task force in high-risk areas." He smiled faintly. "I don't need a title. I need answers. And you'll get them," Helen replied, patting his shoulder. At that moment, Paul ran down the hallway, eyes gleaming like a child's. "Joseph, Emily needs you. Hurry." In the pediatric room, Emily sat on a wooden chair, holding Hope. Sunlight filtered through her tousled hair. She smiled, Emily said, lips trembling. Hope turned to Joseph, wide-eyed, and gave a clear smile. Joseph stepped forward, knelt down. The little girl reached out to him. He picked her up, holding her close. "You're truly healthy now," he whispered. "We had thought," Emily began, "we thought we would leave her here, under treatment, with the care team. But we can't." Paul nodded slowly. We're going back home. Somewhere cleaner, quieter. But we can't raise her the same way anymore. Joseph was stunned. You're thinking of... The door opened. An older woman entered. She wore a cream-colored cardigan, her gray hair tied neatly back, holding a handmade yarn doll. "Hello," she said softly. "I'm Dr. Evelyn Grant. I practiced pediatrics for over 30 years. I never had children, but I would like to volunteer to raise Hope." Joseph stood silently. Helen approached and whispered, "Evelyn is the only one we truly trust. She once adopted a child with cerebral palsy in 2007, loved him unconditionally." Emily placed a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "I'm not abandoning my child. I'll still visit. But I can't give her what you can." Paul held Joseph's hand. "We're not losing her. We're giving her a better beginning." Evelyn took Hope into her arms. The baby nestled into her, as if they'd known each other forever. A few months later, a small house on the outskirts of Springfield, green iron gate, purple flower garden, butterflies fluttering along the path. Hope, now nearly a year old, was toddling on the lawn, holding on to the edge of a wooden bench. Evelyn sat nearby, knitting, eyes gently watching. The doorbell rang. "It's Joseph," Hope called out, babbling. Evelyn opened the gate. Joseph stepped in, holding a storybook and a small pillow printed with a sun. "Hello, my little princess." "Uncle Joseph," the baby squealed, running to hug his legs. He lifted her up, spinning her in the golden afternoon light. Both laughed joyfully. Evelyn poured tea, placing 3 cups in the garden. "She's been eating better ever since you brought her the new doll. It hasn't left her hand." "She started talking?" he asked. "Talking in mischief," Evelyn laughed. "But every morning, first thing she says is, 'Where's Uncle Joseph?'" He leaned down, touching the tip of her nose, the spot where the parasite had once been, now perfectly healed. "There's no parasite in you anymore," he whispered. "But something precious stayed behind, a strength no one can take from you." She nodded, not fully understanding, but repeated, "Strong." He set her down and pulled from his backpack a watercolor set, paintings of baby Hope smiling, sleeping, using a ventilator, and finally, a butterfly flying up from the ruins of the boarding complex. "This little girl survived when everything was against her," he said. "Now she's the light guiding an entire healthcare system." 1 year later, at the National Conference on Regional Healthcare Reform, Joseph was invited to speak before nearly 1,000 doctors and high-level officials. He used no slides, no printed speech. He simply placed a photo on the podium, Hope at age 3, smiling under the sun, wearing a green dress and red hat. "This is why I'm still in this profession," he said. "Not for accolades, but so no one has to die because we were afraid to speak." The entire room gave a standing ovation. After the speech, a group of young doctors approached. "We're launching a new course on environmental epidemiology, based on the Hope case model." A female student teared up. "I was about to drop out, but your story made me want to keep going." Joseph said nothing. He just nodded. That night, he returned to his old apartment. On the bookshelf, among piles of files, ultrasound photos and old newspapers, was the handwritten letter Emily had once given him. "Joseph, you kept my child alive, and more than that, you helped us believe that justice still exists. Thank you for not being afraid." He held the letter to his chest, eyes closed. Wind drifted in from the window, cold but gentle, like a soft whisper. "Thank you." This story shows that silence in the face of evil can destroy an entire generation. If Dr. Joseph hadn't spoken out, if Martha hadn't risked her life to share the truth, baby Hope would have remained just another nameless entry on a death certificate. The lesson is clear. Justice does not come from titles or power, but from conviction and compassion. Even when the whole system turns away, one person standing firm can make a difference. No one is too small to spark hope, as long as they don't stay silent. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.